By the rivers of Babylon, yeah, we sat down and we cried when we remembered Jerusalem. We were sick, Lord, near to dying. Oh,
Hallelujah. Shalom, shalom, family. Welcome to another Bible class. My name is Uzziah Lewy. I'm one of the teachers of Congregation BINAH CHOKMAH, located in the Red Hook section of Brooklyn, New York. Our address, 382 Hamilton Avenue, Brooklyn, New York. Praying that the Creator of heaven and earth will continue to be with each and every one of us, that the Most High will watch over us and bless us, that the Most High God will continue to bless Yisrael scattered in the four corners of the earth and all his people. Praying that the Most High God will look over those who are not doing well, who are sick at this moment. Praying for the life of our sister Jessica. Praying also for that the Most High God will heal her, that the Most High God will keep her, that the Most High God would even protect her. Also praying for the life of all those or for the health of all those who need prayer. Continue to be with our brother Zamir's mother and sister, Ima Havared's mother. Praying that the Most High God will continue to be with the family of Adonia Kesquel, that the family of Chief Elquan in their loss. The Most High God will heal them. Praying for all of those who are here on this chat that might be going through something. We pray that the Most High God would heal, protect you, strengthen you. The Most High God would even give you the strength to be 100% once again. I pray that the Creator of heaven and earth will cause us all to be enlightened and to gain understanding and wisdom in the things that we do. So with that being said, I'm grateful to the Creator for my life and the life of my family, the life of my loved ones. I pray that the Most High God will continue to be with us all. So I hope that everyone is starting out their week in a good way, and that the Most High God will bless the rest of your week, and that the Most High God will continue to uplift your spirits, and that you may gain understanding in these lessons that are being brought forth. So today, in episode 21, we will be talking about damages, and to move on in that part of the lesson, I'll pass the mic over to my brother, Rabbi Chief Binyamin. How are you, Rabbi?
I'm good this morning. Hopefully you're well and everybody is well this morning, along with yourself. And as you prayed, and just praying that the Most High will continue to be with everyone as we will continue our reading of our studies of the Bible this morning, and just start thanking the Most High for all that he does for us and the strength that he provides us with, and praying that he would allow us to obtain wisdom from his word as we go forth and reading throughout his word this day. And as we continue to do, we have selected topics for each week that we have our Bible lessons, many suggested by those that watch, whether live or later on. So we do encourage people to place their comments, their suggestions, whether it's in this chat or when the video is no longer live, you can put it in the comments of this video or past videos as well. So any ideas or any thoughts that you want to get into, so this These Bible studies are open for all that have the Bible as the foundation of their faith or the foundation of their belief. And our objective as we study the Bible is to obtain favor in the sight of God and to find out the words that God has for us, the thoughts that he has for us, and the way that we are supposed to be living before him. So again, we do have selected topics that we go through each week. We generally go through them for about 20 minutes and then open up the rest of the hour for comments and questions from those that are watching on the YouTube and on Facebook. And you can feel free to share this video along with your family and your friends, all of those who study the Bible as well. So now our goal is to enhance or increase our spirituality, to enhance and increase our obedience to the Most High God. And again, searching his word to see the things that he will enlighten our minds to. So we are going to continue partly, in line with the discussion that we had last week, where we were in the book of Exodus. We were actually in Exodus chapter 22 last week. So with selected verses, we're going to go back to Exodus 21 this day, and we're talking about damages that are incurred from, well, as we read it, we'll see damages that are incurred from animals that people own. But that topic is still extended to today, and it's just basically showing responsibility. Last week we talked about, if somebody gives you something, or if you give somebody something to guard, to keep, to protect while you're away, and the various things that may unfortunately happen to those items that you give somebody to keep, and the responsibilities that they have and what would take place if anything happens. And then we also spoke about if you lend somebody something and if anything happens to it, the responsibility of those that borrowed an item. So we're going to speak about damages today, and we're going to go into the book of Exodus chapter 21, and we're going to begin reading in verse 28. And as mentioned last week, but I believe in Exodus 21, the verse numbers are the same in all versions. I know somewhere between Exodus 21 and 22, the verse numbers change by one, depending on which version of the Holy Scriptures that you're reading, but the context is still the same as we read. And also, as a convention that we do here, as we have a Bible study, is in regards to pronouncing the name of God in the locations that they exist within the Holy Scriptures. So when that occurs, we'll explain further, but when you hear us reading, instead of us saying the Lord as it is translated in many translations, we'll mention the name of God in those places as they occur in the Hebrew text. So again, just gonna go through everything. So we are in Exodus chapter 21. We're going to begin in verse 28. And it says there, and if an ox gore a man or a woman, that they die, the ox shall be surely stoned, and his flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall be quit. But if the ox was wont to gore in time past, and warning hath been given to its owner, and he have not kept it in, but it have killed a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and his owner also shall be put to death. So we will stop right there before we continue. So we're speaking to a people, speaking to the Israelites at this time. And again, these are the commandments of God as we read in the Holy Scriptures. So it is speaking about if an ox, as it mentioned here, gores an individual and the person dies, it's speaking about the responsibility of the owner of that ox. You may not own an ox, you may not own any form of cattle, but any animal that you own, you have to be careful of, or you have to safeguard it from hurting someone else. So you may be a dog owner. You may, because that's primarily what we could refer it to today for those of us that are city dwellers. That there are people that do own dogs, so you have to be careful of how you let your dogs roam. Even within various states in the United States, that there are laws. There are leash laws. A lot of these leash laws and a lot of the laws that appear in various countries in regards to animals and how they may harm individuals, we see that the source of it came from the Bible that we're reading here today. So it is our responsibility to make sure that we protect other people. And that's the general gist that we should take from this. So it's speaking about a specific scenario, but we have to be careful of the animals that we own, or even the things that we own that could cause harm, that could cause damage to other people. So in the case of an animal, as it mentions here, in the case of an ox, or as we mentioned here, to relate to today's time, if it is a dog and the dog mauls somebody and that individual dies, then the dog would be put to death. Of course, the eating of dogs is prohibited by the commandments of God. But so it mentioned an ox because an ox is a clean animal. Many of you have heard Chief Uziel's lesson about dietary law a few weeks ago, and I know he'll go into it again in more sectionalized discussions on it. But it mentions an ox here because people may feel that, okay, the ox was put to death, it is a clean animal, that they would be able to eat the flesh. But God is saying here that no, if the ox kill somebody, you put the ox to death and you don't even eat the flesh of that ox. But it also mentions that as it goes here, that if the ox was want to go in the time past, and warning had been given to his owner that in the past it may have gored somebody, and that at that time the person didn't die, or if people see that the ox has a personality that it could gore someone and could cause a lot of damage and a lot of harm, and the owner of the ox was told about this in the past, and the owner didn't take the proper precautions to keep that particular ox shut in. Same thing with a dog, as we mentioned today, that people may see that the dog, it had not killed anybody yet, but people see that it has that personality, that has that spirit within it, so to speak, for lack of a better terms, that it could do something, and the owner of the dog was told about that, and the dog owner didn't do anything about that. And if the dog ends up killing someone, then the dog would be put to death, and the owner of the dog would also be put to death. Now that's part of law that we don't see here in the United States, where they would put the dog to death, but they wouldn't. There's those statutes in the United States laws that would cause the owner of the dog to be put to death. But there would be damages, of course. The owner would be liable, and that's where we get to the next section that we read here. That for verse 30, if there be laid on him a ransom, then he shall give for the redemption of his life whatsoever is laid upon him. So there is an opportunity for the owner, this again is talking about the ox, but there is an opportunity for the owner of an animal, that if the animal was known to gore, known to maul in the past, and at this particular time it gored or mauled someone, that the person died, that the animal would be put to death, and the owner is also supposed to be put to death, but the owner of the animal can have a ransom laid on their life to where they can pay a sum of money in order for them to stay alive, so to speak. And again, these are some of the laws that we see here in the United States and in other countries as well, that this would be the part that is inflicted upon the owner of an animal. So we see that we see where some of these statutes come from. Again, these may not be things that we are familiar with when reading the Bible, but we see here that these passages do exist. And again, that is the purpose of us reading through the Bible and having our Bible study, that we want to make sure that we obtain all of the information that is contained within it, so we can know how to live before the Most High God. So God covers a lot of things that, many of us may not realize. We are familiar with the 10 Commandments, which is how we started off our Bible study a few months ago. We, went through the 10 Commandments one by one, and now we are going through various other commandments, again, that people may not be familiar with, or people may be unaware exists within the Holy Scriptures. Then verse 31 goes on to say, whether it have got a son or have got a daughter, according to this judgment shall it be done unto him. So it's basically talking about everything from verse 28 down to 30, that those would be the judgments that would be performed. Again, if an animal kills somebody, the owner of the animal, the animal would be put to death. The owner of the animal would still be able to live. But if the animal was known to do damage in the past and the owner was warned, then the owner would also be put to death. But if a ransom was laid on that owner's life, then that would be done. And then it summarizes it by saying, whether it have got a son or have got a daughter, according to the judgment shall it be done to him. And it summarizes it. So it's saying basically, if it's a grown person or a young child, whatever it is, that's the judgment that would be done. So that covers that segment of it. But it goes on to say, for verse 32, if the ox go a bondman or a bondwoman, he shall give unto their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. So it gives a separation in terms of the class of the individual that was killed here. Because a bondman or a bondwoman is basically a servant, someone that works for someone, and it mentions the master. So an individual may own servants. Servants will be a subject that we'll touch in the future as well. But there is provision within God's laws where people can have servants, or people can own servants. We could consider it today as an employee. It's just not the same when we read it scripturally, an employee, because when someone in scripture, and as we read in the Holy Scriptures, if they have an employee or they have a servant, then they actually own that individual. But in owning that individual, they're responsible for the upkeep of that individual, their food, their shelter, and clothing completely. So they're completely taking care of that individual. And that individual that is a servant unto that master is, of course, working for them. So that's, we use the modern term of employee. We just know the employee today is you go to work, you're not owned, so to speak, by your employer, but they do have certain rules over you anyway, as being an employee for that individual or for that organization. But there is provision in the Holy Scriptures for that situation. So if the ox gores a bondman or a bondwoman, because the master of that individual is now losing out on a servant, losing out on someone that was working for them, losing out on someone that they were taking care of, that they were actually paying for, then the owner of the ox would pay 30 shekels of silver to, no, the owner of the ox would pay 30 shekels of silver to the master of that servant, because their animal killed that servant, and the ox or that animal will still be stoned or put to death. So that covers that subject in terms of animals in regards to damages and the hurt or the harm, or in the cases speaking more specifically about the killing that an animal may do to someone else. Now in verse 33 is going to go into a different subject. And if a man shall open a pit, or if a man shall dig a pit and not cover it, and an ox or an ass fall therein, the owner of the pit shall make it good. He shall give money unto the owner of them, and the dead beast shall be his. So it's now speaking about a subject to where we have to be careful of our surroundings. We have to be careful of, as it mentions here, a pit may be opened for whatever reason. A man may dig a pit, a man may open a pit, it's not covered, and the animal falls into it, and the animal falls into it and dies. Then the one that dug the pit, the owner of that pit, has to make good. He has to give money unto the owner of that animal. And then, but the owner of that pit, the one that is responsible for the death of someone else's animal, they would get that dead animal. That'd just be, compensation, for lack of a better term. But they have to make sure that they compensate for the animal that an individual lost because of their negligence. So again, we are speaking in terms of damages. The overall subject that we could consider this is negligence. So we have to be careful of the things that we do. Take it as something as simple today as, you may be in a public thoroughfare and, floor being mopped. That's why you have to be careful. If you're in a store, that's why they put the signs up, wet floor, or if you're in any type of building, wet floor. If you are a property owner, you have to make sure that, your sidewalk is clean so that no one, trips, falls, and, gets hurt on it. So these general cases that are speaking about here in the Bible is, covers a lot of topics that we can consider today overall in regards to negligence. And negligence does not excuse anyone from having to make compensation. And the compensation will be based on what takes place. So in this case specifically, is talking about a pit and an animal falls into it, and the owner of that pit has to make it good for the one that for the animal that fell into it and died as a result of that. Now, verse 35 is going to be speaking about another subject, and we're going to be actually ending our discussion today with this subject. And it mentions if one man's ox hurt another's so that it dies, then they shall sell the live ox and divide the price of it, and the dead also they shall divide. Or if it be known that the ox was wont to go in time past, and its owner have not kept it in, he shall surely pay ox for ox, and the dead beast shall be his own. So it's speaking here of one animal hurting another man's, or killing another person's animal, and what would be the judgment for that. We read earlier about an animal killing a human being. Now I was talking about an animal killing another animal. So the owner of the ox, in this case, that killed another person's ox, or it's just a general term, general case. If it killed another person's animal, then as it mentions here, the live one, the animal that did the killing, they would sell that one. They would divide the price of that live one. They would also divide the price of the dead animal between the owners of the animal that did the killing and the owner of the one that was killed. So again, they would sell the live animal, divide the price of it, and they would also divide the price of the dead animal. But as it mentions here in verse 36, or if it be known that the ox was wont to go in time past, and its owner have not kept it in, he shall surely pay ox for ox, and the dead beast shall be his own. So now in the case where the animal was, as we read earlier, warning was given, the owner was told in the past, keep your oxen, or as we mentioned today, keep your dog in, and the dog, hurts another animal. Then in this case, that it's not going to be like the case that we read in verse 35, where they would just sell the live animal, divide the price of it, and then also divide the price of the dead one, as it says here, that he shall surely pay ox for ox, and the dead beast shall be his own. So the owner of the live animal has to make full compensation for the dead animal, himself or herself. It's not a case where they would sell it. The money would be actually coming out of the pocket strictly of the owner of the animal, and that money would be given to the owner of the dead animal, and then the person that who had the animal that did the killing, they would be able to keep the dead beasts for their, for their purpose of that, compensation, for lack of a better term, but it's actually just a judgment, just so that, the disposal or whatever it is of the dead animal would be the responsibility of the owner of the animal that did the killing. So we spoke, again today about subjects in regards to negligence, and in regards to the damages, in regards to how we have to safeguard, we have to protect things, safeguard our surroundings, safeguard animals that we may own, and we have to be careful that it does not harm anyone. And based on the class of the individuals that are harmed as a result of that, that would also determine the compensation that has to be given. And also based on the warning that may or may not have been given to an individual, will also determine how compensation would be given. It also basically just determines the judgment that will be performed. So we would conclude our discussion in regards to damages and negligence today, on that point. And we're going to open it up for questions or comments from those that may have questions and comments out there before we conclude our Bible study for the day. So again, we are grateful to the Most High God for allowing us the opportunity to read and study his word this day, and praying that he would continue to guide us in the way that we should live before him. So again, we will open it up for those that may have questions and comments out there, and before we conclude, or if anybody has any suggestions that they would like to make for future discussions, they could feel free to do so at this time. The questions that people may have, or the comments that people may have at this time, do not have to be on the subject that we had today. And but we're going to focus on the subject of the day first before discussing anything else. So now is the time for anybody to say anything, and if not, then I would also, I don't see any questions or comments on the YouTube, so I would also turn it back to Chief Uziel as well, as we begin to wind down for the day, or for our morning, I should say.
Okay. See if there's any questions or comments on Facebook. Let me check there. So we the questions don't necessarily have to be about the topic today. The questions could be about anything, just to clarify to everyone out there. If you have a question about anything, this is the time to ask it. And we'll do our best to answer it, or the rabbi will do his best to answer it. And sometimes when it comes to liability, it doesn't only have to be, I don't know if you got in depth into this, but it doesn't only have to be in the physical form, but also like if you destroy something physically of someone, but also would that also be, let's say, like slandering someone's name? That's destroying someone's character. Would that be almost in the same sense as property? I know it's not a physical thing. It's more of an image type thing that you're destroying. So how will you deal with something like that in terms of that, Rabbi?
So in terms of slander, that is covered in Leviticus chapter 18 in regards to us not slandering, not tale-bearing.
Right.
As it mentions there are no written judgments in regards to that. So that would be the determination of the judges. And of course, the individual that was slandered, they would have to bring up the case of slander. And then based on the damage that, was done to the individual, the judges will make a determination based on that. So as you mentioned, these are, what we read was talking about physical damages, physical things, physical property, or lives that were also harmed or taken away as in regards to someone's negligence. So the compensation could be, spelled out directly because of the literal damage that took place. So in regards to to slander, the judges would have to determine the extent of the damage that was done via the slander. Did the person just to, give a scenario, did the person lose a job? And if they lost the job, it could be possible that the judges may rule that compensation would have to be made monetarily because now a person lost their livelihood. And we see a lot of cases where God cares about people's livelihood and cares about the jobs that he does give us, cares about the money that he does give us. So if someone loses any form of money as regards to someone's words, then it's quite possible the judges will make a determination based on that, and the individual will have to make compensation for that time loss, whatever that time loss might be. So just to give an example of how slander could affect someone. In regards to slander affecting, because slander could affect friendships, it could affect relationships. The judges can make a determination based on the friendship or the relationship that was lost at that time based on the slander, and possibly come up with a monetary amount in regards to that. But we do read, at least two places within the scripture about the eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Basically, what is done to someone would have to be compensated for. And that's the gist of when it talks about eye for eye, tooth for tooth, and foot for foot. Of course, it wouldn't be taken literal in this case about slander, in case, in the terms of if somebody slanders someone, of course, the compensation wouldn't be that they would be slandered. The compensation would have to be made based on the slander that was done. So, that would be my answer in regards to that. That definitely would be up to the judges based on what was lost in regards to that.
Oriyahu Ben Shem on YouTube writes, what is the understanding concerning redemption if the firstborn, do they believe G to the tribe of Levi? Do they believe G to the tribe of Levi? I'm not understanding the question.
They might have, the letter might be a mistake. So concerning the redemption of firstborn, I know some communities do it, some don't. But we do know that the firstborn, of course, for those that are listening, this is a different subject. So in regards to the firstborn, God mentioned from the time that the children of Israel were brought, from the time that God brought the children of Israel out of Egypt. We read this in Exodus chapters 12 and 13, that the final plague over Egypt was God passed over all the land of Egypt and killed the firstborn of the man and beast of the Egyptians. And for the children of Israel, the firstborn was saved alive, or everybody was saved alive when the children of Israel had to perform the Passover sacrifice, take the blood and put it up on the doorpost and the lintel of the homes that they were living in Egypt as God was passing over the land. So because God did kill the firstborn of the man and beast of the Egyptians, God said again in Exodus chapters 12 and 13 that all the firstborn of man and beast of the children of Israel belong unto him. So there is a redemption process for the firstborn of the sons. As it mentions, the firstborn son that opened up the womb, that there would be a 5 shekel redemption that would be given to the priests. If we read that in the book of Numbers, that is the redemption, that is the continual redemption process for the firstborn sons. Prior to that, but when we first came out of Egypt, the tribe of Levi was separated from the rest of the nation of Israel only in terms of the tribe of Levi, or the tribe of Levi not owning land in the land of Israel, not having actual property, but they would belong to God. And God said that the Levites would be the replacement for the firstborn. So their job, their duty, their responsibility, their existence is to be that was the initial redemption of the firstborn. But after that, after they counted the Levites in the desert at that time, they counted the firstborn of the children of Israel, and that redemption process was done there. Then afterwards, God specified that there would be a 5 shekel payment for the firstborn sons that opened up the womb that would be given to the priests. Then for the firstborn animals that are clean, that are acceptable as offerings, those firstborn animals would be offered. They would actually be given to the priests, and then the priest would offer it. And the remaining flesh that was not put on the altar would belong to the priest. So that would be the process of the firstborn clean animals being given unto God. Now the unclean animals, there is a redemption process for that, whether it would be replaced by a clean animal. We read in some cases where that firstborn animal, the unclean animal, would actually be killed. So there are different ways to redeem the unclean animal, but all firstborn, all the males that open the womb of man and beast of the children of Israel belong to God. So that's just to give an overview or what the question is coming from. So the firstborn would not, they do not belong to the Levites, they do not belong to the tribe of Levi, because there is a redemption process that was instituted at that time. How that is instituted today, again, different communities have a form of that redemption, whether it's doing nothing at all but acknowledging that the firstborn do belong to God, or whether it is a sum of money that will be paid to the congregation for the redemption process. So again, the process today is done differently by different people, but in just regards specifically to the question, the firstborn animals would actually, according to scripture, would belong to the priests, and the firstborn of humans are redeemed. So that's the process that would be done.
So I think the more interesting question would be to get a little bit deeper in the science. So being that we know that the tribe of Levi is set aside to the Creator for the service, right? And the Most High God redeemed the tribe of Levi for himself. In terms of firstborns that are born within the tribe of Levi, how does that work in terms of possession? Because the Levites don't inherit any land. So does it mean that everyone in the tribe of Levi, every firstborn in the tribe of Levi just gets like a flat rate, and your job is to be a Levite and to teach and to be a priest or to be a carrier of the articles or to be a musician? Or is it just, does it apply the same way as when the firstborn gets a double portion?
So with the firstborn of the Levites,
question make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
So how that process would start, the firstborn of the Levites, they would also be redeemed because again, all the firstborn would be redeemed of the children of Israel. So,
right.
And that 5 shekel payment goes to the priests. So the priests, for the Levites that are not priests, they will still be able to do that. They will still be able to, or the parents, I should say, of that male child will be able to give the 5 shekels to the priest. What happens to the firstborn of a priest? That probably be a whole different discussion, which is not even written in scripture. But
not only a priest, but a Levite.
Yeah.
Do they get how does the inheritance thing work when they don't have no land to inherit?
Right. Yeah. So being that, right. So that's for the second part. So the redemption could take place now in terms of the inheritance part, being that the Levites don't have an inheritance at all. So yes, the firstborn of the Levites would not get an inheritance. They will be I don't want to use the word nothing, but that's the word that fits the sentence I'm about to say. But the parents, or specifically the father, would not have anything to give to their firstborn child or to any of their children as an inheritance, because the Levites, again, they only got cities to dwell in with some land around it, and that was just shared by all of the Levites. The city itself and the land around it was shared by all Levites. So Levite fathers didn't have anything specifically to give to their children as an inheritance.
That's interesting. I mean, that's a deeper discussion for something, for another subject, and I could turn it into something else. Well, you know, in terms of those who serve God, who join the people to God, then that tells us that I don't think they lived in a poor state, but they didn't live in I don't think they lived like in how would I say it? They weren't overly rich. I don't know if that's appropriate. I know they got a lot of stuff. If the nation was functioning properly, you know, they got the tithes and they got certain things, but in terms of living opulent, I'm not sure how that worked out for them. What's
But
your
they
thoughts
would
on it?
they would the Levites themselves, and I'll include the priests, live strictly as a community. So as a community, they were well off.
Gotcha.
The high priests, and then the priesthood directly under the high priest would definitely have more things than other people because they received redemption money for the firstborn. They received firstborn animals.
Gotcha.
They received tithes of the Levites, because remember the Levites had to pay tithes to the priests of the tithes that they received from everybody else.
Right.
So the priesthood themselves, they had a community that was well off. But the Levites, the Levite community was also, as a whole, was well off. So for the sake of not being flagged, so to speak, but that's, when we think of the positive aspects of communism, that's where it would come from. As a community, everybody's, the Levites would live together, they would dwell together within those cities, and they would be well off as a community as opposed to an individual, being more well off than the other. They would all look out for one another because they are all receiving from the same pot. So amongst themselves, they would have to divide the tithes that they receive from the people amongst themselves so that they would all be happy. So they shouldn't be within a Levite city, so to speak, poor Levite, and then there's a rich one. That shouldn't exist within a Levitical city if they're dividing the tithes equally amongst all the Levites. And that's basically how they're supposed to live. And then, of course, that extends to the priest's family as well. Like I said, the only individual I would see that would be rich, so to speak, would be the high priest, because he would receive more than anybody else. And because of where, his quarters, where he would live, him and his family, being at the temple, and them being taken care of by the temple funds, along with everything else that is done there. But yeah, I would say the Levites lived as a community, so they would all be balanced and it would all be fair amongst themselves. But in regards to your previous question in terms of inheritance, so then they wouldn't have any inheritance to give to anybody because they're receiving an equal share anyway.
So yeah, and now that I'm thinking about it, sometimes we forget that there are laws where people, like a Levite could have become, let's say for example, could have become rich by, let's say he saves up his money, buys land when people from other tribes are kind of like in hard times.
Mm-hmm.
So he might buy a property knowing that he has to release it back during a certain period of time, the Jubilee, because all land goes back to the tribe that it belongs to. But in between time, between those 49 years, you can actually purchase land if somebody falls into a hard time and cultivate the land and grow produce and sell the produce that come from it. So, I mean, we could think of Levites in that term too, because you got people that are business savvy in any community. So, yeah, it probably was some Levites that got rich by doing things like that.
On
What do
their
you
own.
think?
Yeah,
On
yeah,
their
on
own,
the,
yeah,
yeah,
on their
right,
own,
on their
yeah.
own. I mean, that would be the more likely
Scenario.
right scenario for a Levite to be rich, if because when we think about Levites, they do live as a community, but they are also human beings within the entire society.
Right,
So
they move around.
um, generally it's spoken of in terms of the work that they do for the Most High God and joining the people to God, but they were human beings, so they had day-to-day lives. They would have trades as well. They would have, as you mentioned, they could be carpenters, the builders, and even amongst the women, they would have jobs as well to sustain themselves along with what was taken. So uh, we don't want to give the concept that Levites would be lazy in terms of they would do nothing but just receive things from the people. They had lives as well. They interacted with people as well, being that they were human beings. So in that aspect, that's a good point. In that aspect, that's how certain Levites can become rich based on their own merit and based on their own skills that they developed. And so that would work. So they would be able to, gather their own money. And if they're in a Levitical city, they would be able to build probably a bigger and better house than other people that's within that city based on their own funds. But as a community, the things that they receive as a community, they would have to share equally. Now, a rich Levite, again, being that they're living in a community, there'll probably be some, and these would not be laws of God because they're not written, but there would probably be some traditions and statutes within a Levitical city in terms of, okay, if you have a rich Levite, then the tithes that come in and, you might need to ease up a little bit because we know that you got it. So, but that's probably like, an unwritten rule amongst the Levites that we know you got it. Not that you can't get any tithes because the tithes are actually yours, but, ease up a little bit because we know that you got it. And somebody may mismanage their tithes and end up being less well off because they mismanaged what came in. So, it can basically go either way, but they're supposed to live as a community and share equally.
Well, I would push back a little bit on that, because even if he was well off and he was rich, you can't tell him that he can't get what's allotted to him by God. This is what
Yeah.
is allotted to him by God. Like, so whether he's a millionaire, but he still has to get this stipend, this whatever it was monthly, this $1,000, $1,500 monthly. Now it's up to him whether or not he say, nah, I don't need it. Give it, I want to give it to someone else. So, put it back in the fund for those who are poor and needy. You know, that's for him to make
Yeah.
that decision. I don't think they would tell him you need to ease up because you rich. So ease up on getting your monthly stipend or however they broke it down.
Yeah, that would be a statute that they would have to discuss amongst themselves. Because again, the tithes go to the Levites. So if there's a head of that city or cities, so to speak, within the territory, it does belong to everybody. So I'm not saying that it does that, but amongst themselves, they might have some sort of unwritten code that be like, and when I say ease up, not that they're forcing them, but they be like, have some consideration. They would have that, discussion with the rich ones, just have some
But then
consideration
that
for
wouldn't be
everybody
just
else.
weights and balance. It goes back
Yeah.
to Torah, right? Torah teaches Torah.
Well, amongst the Levites, I mean, if you got this millionaire Levite and like I said, these are all unwritten rules. So that's what I'm not
No, I
saying that.
know.
Yeah,
It's just a discussion. That's
yeah. These are not. That's what I say. These would probably be unwritten codes,
right.
like how people have today the bro codes and stuff like that.
Right.
That so these would just be codes that would be probably among the Levites to just ease up, and they probably would make them feel guilty. There could be various scenarios, but ultimately it does belong to them. But we know how we make people feel. As we know how we make people, or could make people feel.
All right. Shalom, will there be a unity gathering for all Yisrael with Beit D.C.B sister congregation in North Carolina on this coming Shabbat? So yes, the house of the Hebrew House of Charlotte will be having a unity event. I believe they call their unity event
It's normally called Shabbat Ahav.
yeah, Shabbat Ahav, or Shabbat of Love. So yes, it will be going down this, I believe this coming Shabbat is July 1st. July 1st.
Yeah.
July 1st weekend. So yeah, definitely. We a lot of us will be down there, but Beit D.C.B will still have the doors open, and we will have teachers streaming from our congregation. Usually what happens is, if I make it down there, Yah willing, I'll have a recording of it. If I don't make it down there, then I'll try to leave the equipment with my brother, Rabbi Binyamin, so he could get the footage. And usually the following week, we post it up on the Uziah Lewi channel, all of the events that happen down there. So yes, that's what is supposed to happen this weekend. So hopefully anyone that's in the Charlotte area will be able, or close to the Charlotte area, a couple of hours, 2-3 hours away, whatever, come and meet the brothers and sisters from the Hebrew House of Charlotte. And Sunday they have other events and things of that nature. They're going to have events and boat rides and things of that nature. So yeah, just that's what will be going on. Things they don't discuss in church. What is Numbers chapter 3 verses 11 and 12 really saying? Levites replacing firstborn consecration. Numbers chapter 3 verses 11 and 12.
Okay, so we'll go there, but that is basically the gist of the conversation that we were having in terms of the Levites being that replacement for the firstborn. So they're specifically talking, the verses that were mentioned was specifically pointing to the discussion that we were having. Again, so this is Numbers chapter 3, verses 11 and 12, as was mentioned there, but we can also go on to 13 to complete the thought. And Yahweh spoke unto Moses, saying, and I, behold, I have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel, instead of every firstborn that opens the womb among the children of Israel, and the Levites shall be mine. And verse 13 basically gives the explanation of 11 and 12. For all the firstborn are mine. On the day that I smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, are hallowed unto me all the firstborn in Israel, both man and beast. Mine they shall be. I am Yahweh. So it mentions, because again, when Jehovah God brought the children of Israel out of Egypt, that final plague was the death of the firstborn of the Egyptians, the man of man and beast of the Egyptians. And God immediately after that said that all the firstborn of the children of Israel, man and beast, belonged to him. Again, referring back to Exodus chapters 12 and 13. So this is at that time, God mentioned to the children of Israel that there would be a redemption process for the firstborn. Now, this is the second year in the book of Numbers. This is in the, actually, no, at this time it's still the first year, because this is when the Levites will be separated. The book of Numbers starts in the second year, but this process actually goes back a little bit within this chapter. So it's basically saying that when they did the count of the Levites, that the count of the Levites, when you read this entire chapter, Numbers chapter 3, the number of Levites came up to 22,000. And then they also counted the firstborn of the children of Israel of the other tribes, besides the tribe of Levi. And that count came to 22,273. So basically for this process, this was the initial process. So for each Levite, that Levite would redeem a firstborn. And then as based on the count, there was 273 firstborn extra than the Levites that were counted. So those 273 had to be redeemed by the 5 shekels. And then when we read later on in the book of Numbers, from that point onwards, any firstborn of the children of Israel outside of the tribe of Levi had to be redeemed by 5 shekels. So what this passage basically is saying is that the Levites do replace the firstborn. So their role in their consecration, or as it mentioned in the end of verse 13, them belonging to Jehovah God is a redemptive process for the firstborn of the children of Israel belonging to God. So that's the best way to explain that process of what the Levites mean in regards to the firstborn of the children of Israel.
Hallelujah. Brother Oriyahu Ben Shem coming to Florida. Hopefully, at some point, we will become such an organization that we could have Unity Shop tote in different locations. I know that a lot of people are out there. They can't see us because they're not that close to New York City, but hopefully we get to a point where we could do these events in different locations, different states, and make it an event, so hopefully sometime in the near future. So there are no more questions. If there are no more questions, Darby and Jesse said off the subject, I just learned that Germany has paid $86.5 billion in restitution for their Holocaust crimes. That's good for those victims. That's a good thing. And we need to start working on our families, and our people need to start, or the U.S. needs to start working on the reparation for slavery. So, but that's a whole nother topic for another day. And it's
very subject. Certain states are instituting their own ways of reparation. Yes, okay. Different states have different ways. One of the reasons why is just to throw it in there, it is a complicated subject. We know that based on slavery, there is reparation that is owed, a restitution that is owed. It becomes a complicated subject because there are many U.S. citizens that were not born in the United States,
or their descendants were not.
Right. So as a result of that, it becomes complicated in terms of how do you compensate for that, and that can become a big dividing factor amongst our community if reparations were to be given. I know that recently, just to spend another minute on the subject, I know recently in California, no, not in California, I believe it's San Francisco specifically, not just California. San Francisco laid out terms of reparations for its residents, and they were very particular in terms of how they said you can actually get that money or get that compensation. So it's not just simply being a U.S. citizen of slave descent. You had to be a descendant of a slave in the United States. So it gets complicated from there.
Yeah, because they know people are going to run that money down. Yeah, your parents could have came from Jamaica in the early 1900s,
Right.
Your great-great-grandparents or whatever it may be. So what they're saying basically is those people, being that you're descendants from them, that you can't get it. But it gets tricky because it, your great great grandparents might have came from there on your father's side, but then somewhere down the line, they married a foundational person from here. So yeah, it's going down a rabbit's hole. I guess you would just have to have proof.
Yeah, and that's
that
the
you're a
excuse they're
descendant.
using to not pay reparations because it gets complicated.
Right. Oh well. Question: are Native Americans or Mexicans part of the Israelites' culture?
That would also a complicated question. I know that generally and unfortunately, but the general teaching is based on slavery as it regards to what we read in Deuteronomy 28. But lineages would have to be determined, for even amongst those of us that claim to be Israel, even like, the current generation of us is more of trying to track our lineage based on the unfortunate curses or the punishments that were laid out in Deuteronomy 28. So in terms of Native Americans or Mexicans or anyone from Central America, slavery or the slave ships did go into Central America as well. So it is definitely possible that it's not, because Israel is not based on look. That's an unfortunate teaching that we've had, but it basically helped to inspire those that had a certain look, but is not, Israel does not have quote unquote a certain look. The experience would have to be traced in order to determine that. But that's based on, and so it's not going to even be a group of Native Americans. It's not just going to be a group of Mexicans as a whole or a group of Central Americans, just like it's not an entire group of Black people that can just say, because you're Black, that you're Israel. It's an individual experience, a shared individual experience, but the lineage would have to be traced that way.
Things they don't discuss in church. Now all the questions are coming fast and furious. We up to our hour. Why no damages or punishment if a slave master beats a slave, but he doesn't die? Exodus 21, verses 20 to 21.
So in that case, let's delve into that a little bit more. Exodus 21. And 21. So, which states, and this would be being that these are the chapters that we are actually going into, we most likely get more in depth in a couple of weeks. So it says, if a man smite his bondman or his bondwoman with a rod and he die in his hand, he shall surely be punished. Notwithstanding, if he continue a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his money. The punishment, so in verse 20, the punishment that would be instituted, and this would just be based on an obvious inference. If you commit murder, the punishment for murder is your life being taken. So if a man smite his bondman or his bondwoman with a rod and he die in his hand, he shall surely be punished. That would be murder. And so let me just say, in my opinion, that's murder. Let me just say it that way as well, because there might be different opinions. But if you take somebody's life, we had a discussion of murder, a few months ago as well. So that's how, you would, the owner of the servant would be punished. Notwithstanding, if he continue a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his money. We also read, because this also goes, it's somewhere, it should be within this chapter, because everything has to be put together. So in verse 26, and if a man smite the eye of his bondman or the eye of his bondwoman and destroy it, he shall let him go free for his eye's sake. And if he smite out his bondman's tooth or his bondwoman's tooth, he shall let him go free for his tooth's sake. So all these things go together. So when it goes, So going back to verse 21, where he said that he shall not be punished for he is his money, is in regards to the verse right before that. But it doesn't mean that he's absolved from any type of punishment in terms of the loss of the servant or the loss of money that can be, or the loss of the master's money as a result of the harm that he did to his servant. Is so 20 and 21 are going together in terms of the life being taken. And then when we read it further down, if they do damage, then that's a separate case. But because they inflicted that type of pain or that damage on their servant, they would have to let the servant free. It gives the case of an eye and a tooth. And, it's basically talking about such harm or such damage that is almost irreparable. So if they beating them with the rod and break the arm, the arm could be healed, but the arms and feet and hands don't get healed necessarily back to its original form. So there's some sort of irreparable damage that is done to the servant. So it's basically encouraging masters not to beat their servants. The gist of it may seem like it's given the okay for masters to do so, but it's taking the gist of saying not to do so. And the result is you will lose your money. That would be your judgment. If you cause harm to someone that is not your servant, then the punishment would be based on the damage that you do to that individual. But the fact that you're losing your servant would be a judgment to a person or to people that rely on their servants or employees for their livelihood. So that would be the deterrent from hurting them, because you would be losing out on your money long term.
I think that's pretty much it. So, Darb and Jesse, yes, I see what you wrote, and I will look into it and get in contact with Maury Arania and let him know. All right, and we'll make sure that gets to him. So it seems like we've come to the end. No more questions. See that the room started filling up now at the end, but yes, giving glory to the Most High King of the universe once again for another day, for another Bible study. We hope that you've been enlightened, and we hope that the Most High God will shine His light upon you, the light of wisdom and understanding, and that you're able to take in what is being taught. I know for some of you, you never probably heard any of these things before, but the Bible is more than just a few parables here and there. There are actually, it's said to have 613 laws, statutes, and commandments. So there's a lot of things that we could go through and we could understand. And that's why in the midst of our congregation, we go through the Torah or the commandments and the laws every year. We start the new cycle, right? So thanking the creator of heaven and earth for life, food, clothing, and shelter, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And as I say these words, I pray that the Most High God will continue to be with us and bless us. Yivareka Yehovah Yishmareka. Ya'ir Yehovah Panao Leka Wikuneka. Yisa Yehovah Panao Leka Wayasem Leka Shalom. May Yehovah bless thee and keep thee. May Yehovah make his face to shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. May Yehovah lift up his countenance upon thee and may he grant thee peace. Hallelujah. May the Most High God, King of the universe, be with all of you. May he continue to bless each and every one of you. And may he watch over all of you throughout the week. And hopefully we'll be back here again next week. Shalom, shalom.